If you love Godzilla, there's a chance that you've collected a few fully articulated Godzilla action figures. Whether it be Monster Arts, Haya, Super 7, or even NECA, articulated figures have been a staple of the franchise for quite some time. Unfortunately, unless you're little Timmy maxing out mommy's credit card, articulated figures, especially Godzilla figures, can be hella expensive. Almost every one of my fully articulated Godzilla figures have cost somewhere over 100 Canadian dollars, the highest being this $300 Final Battle Mechagodzilla that I love so much, and was actually a gift, so I really didn't lose anything there. Sure, I may have gotten lucky with some figures like the Haya Kong and Revoltech Gigan, but for the most part, Godzilla figures are expensive. Because of this, and the fact that most articulated figures are just different variants of Godzilla, I've mostly collected Bandai vinyl, specifically from the Movie Monster Series. They're still really well detailed for the most part, and actually include figures that weren't given an articulated counterpart. Then again, the Movie Monster Series figures aren't always the best. In a previous video, I repainted some of the worst Movie Monster Series figures in my collection, alongside one SH Monster Arts figure. I still had a few stinkers sitting in my collection, or under my bed, that I didn't use in that video, like the Movie Monster Series Kiryu 2003, version 1.0 not 2.0, Manda 2004, and Anguirus 2004. I also threw in a Bandai Namco Odo Island Godzilla from -1 just for the sake of it. Today, we'll give them their time to shine, not only by giving them fresh coats of paint, but by making them fully articulated. Essentially, we'll be making our own cost-friendly SH Monster Arts figures. The general formula will be the same as last time. We'll go through each figure one by one, talking about what I don't like about the base figure, the process of reworking it, and the final product. The overall goal of this project is to make these figures better than how they came. Whether I accomplish that or not will be up to you, the viewers, to decide. Now let's get into it.
Everything I've been through, I'ma make it. All I do is write verses, no talking. All I do is put the work in, no option. This was everything I ever wanted. Created a legacy off of me, just being honest. And the fake ones hate, but it's all to no avail. They wanna see me lose, but you know I never fail.
The first figure I customized was Kiryu, surprisingly enough. I knew it would be a challenge, but I really wanted Kiryu as a surprise character in my stop motion series. The overall sculpt of the base figure is fine, but the main problem I had was the paint job. Bandai had once again neglected to paint the details on the tail, as well as some of the wirings on the legs. I would be sure to fix these problems once I implemented the articulation. I would use a blow dryer on the figure and then cut it using a blade. Once all the necessary parts were cut up, I would use some fake Lego ball joints we got from AliExpress for the articulation. It was my first purchase, so it only cost around $2. I'd insert them into the different pieces using hot glue and sometimes cardboard if the holes on some pieces ended up being too big. Once the whole thing was assembled, I painted the parts that were neglected on the base figure, like the tail and leg wirings. I also attempted a battle damage look by adding a black dry brush on the figure. For a first time articulated custom, I think it turned out pretty alright. It solves the main issues I had with the base figure's paint job and looks pretty darn cool when striking a pose. Since this is a mech we're working with here, some of the joints being blatantly visible kinda works in its favor. If I were to go back and change one thing, I would definitely use a bigger ball joint on the torso and maybe on the base of the tail too, since the tiny one I use can't really keep the upper body still given all the weight being placed on it. I probably would have added tail articulation at some point, but I ended up buying this Kiryu model kit not long after I customized this one, making the process almost pointless. But hey, it was still cheaper than Monster Arts. Kiryu having multiple limbs would prove to be quite the challenge, but if I was able to do that, I would certainly have no problem with the next figure in line. Previously, I complained about Manda's awful paint job, or lack thereof, as well as the boring, static pose. I figured Manda would be the perfect candidate for this project, since it would be the perfect opportunity to solve not only the paint problem, but the pose problem as well. Besides, there's no Monster Arts Manda, so why not make one myself? I figured out Kiryu, so Manda definitely should be easy, right? Right? Literally just that easy to just put balls on Godzilla toys. And somehow I still messed it up. I honestly had no idea what I was doing with Manda. The gaps on this thing are really noticeable, and the small ball joints cannot hold a pose for the life of them. I should also mention how this thing constantly falls apart. Some parts like the head and the end of the tail work just fine with the smaller joint, but given the size of these segments, I think I need bigger joints if I want Manda to be able to pose without a stand. At the time of making the script for this video, I don't have enough larger ball joints to re-engineer Manda, especially since some of them got wasted for the sake of another figure in this video. So for now, Manda will remain an unfinished product. I certainly intend to get back to it in the future, but if you still want to see Manda in action, you can watch my Godzilla vs Mechagodzilla stop motion on my channel, where I still ended up using it as a throwaway character. That being said, let's move on to our next character. So far, we've had one decent attempt at a figure and one absolute disaster. Hopefully, I'll be able to get back on track with the next figure, the Bandai Namco Odo Island Godzilla from -1, which I'll just be referring to as Godzillasaurus. Before anyone corrects me, just look at it. Come on. I actually have no major problems with this figure. I just thought that it would be fun to make a fully articulated version. Yes, I know Monster Arts is making their own version, but look how it scales next to the regular -1 figure. The Bandai Namco figure is essentially just a smaller version of the Movie Monster Series version, meaning it'll scale much better with my Monster Arts minus Goji. Fortunately, I streamed a good chunk of the process on my channel, so I'll be able to show you some of the footage. Again, I started by cutting all the pieces I needed using a blow dryer and a blade, and using hot glue to attach the joints to the vinyl pieces. Afterwards, I assembled the entire thing, making the entire figure almost fully articulated. Credit to Goofy Rex 2178 2.0 for the main inspiration behind this custom. For such a small figure, the joints I used were still pretty big for parts like the arms, making it look a little awkward. This is why I left the hands untouched. After the articulation was done, I would need to find a way to hide all the gaps, exposing the clearly different colored joints. What I did was apply some air dry foam over the exposed areas and tried to sculpt them in a way that would make the figure look more natural. Once it was dry, I airbrushed some black primer all over the figure, which would improve how well the later paint job would stick to the figure. Alright, this is how I build it. Shoot! Alright chat, this is what we're working with so far, fully coated, and we will paint it once it's all completely 100% dry, so we'll see then. After the primer had dried, I would continue with the painting process on stream. I'd paint the figure using a mix of brown and a bit of yellow to more closely match the design on my minus Goji figure. Then I'd dry brush some gold on areas like the dorsal plates and limbs to make the figure pop a bit more. I know the actual Godzilla source wasn't actually gold, but the lighting during some of the nighttime scenes did make it look a bit yellow, and besides, I think it looks cool. The final touches included the eyes, teeth, inside of the mouth, and scars throughout the body. Special thanks to Nez Customs for watching the painting process and providing some useful advice on how to paint the scars and preserving the paint job. With the final steps done, it's time to finally show you all my very own custom Godzilla source. I gotta say, personally, I'm really proud of how the final result turned out. There's a decent amount of articulation on this thing, and it still maintains all the detail that the base figure had. If I were to do anything different here, it would probably be to add 1 or 2 more cuts to the tail for a wider range of motion. I would also try to hide the joints a little bit better since they are still pretty visible in some areas. Still, I'm satisfied with the end result, and I really feel no need to buy the Monster Arts version anymore now that I have this one. I'm really looking forward to animating this, and this figure really gave me some more confidence to tackle another potential custom in the future. Engagement check time. If you're still here, remember to comment Blue Ebra to pass the engagement check. Also, while we're still here, this is a reminder to remember to check out some of my other stuff like my stop motions or reviews. Well, that's if you want to. I'd really like to go all in on the stop motions, and any support at all would mean the world to me. You might even see some of the figures in this video make some appearances. That's all. Back to the video. It's time to go over the final figure I'll be customizing in this video, the Movie Monster Series Anguirus 2004. Previously, I talked about the serious personal vendetta I had against this figure. When I found out the original version of this toy was better than the one I got, I seriously hated how lazy the reissue was in comparison. They neglected to paint areas like the tail club, the spikes on the limbs, and even the tongue. Yes, I did rank this figure number 2 in my worst figures video, but this was one that I had since I was 14 and finally started collecting more characters from the franchise. Anguirus has been one of my all-time favorite Toho kaiju, still behind Meguma though, so I couldn't have another Mantis situation. I had to do Anguirus justice, and he would prove to be the ultimate test where I would apply everything I've learned from this and the last customization video. As usual, I started by cutting up the figure into all the pieces I would need, and by attaching the joints to the pieces. I even got bigger ball joints to make areas like the base of the tail and the neck more sturdy. There definitely were a few botched attempts, which is why I didn't have enough for Manda. This process took place in a VC in my Discord server where I would show my progress and create this abomination that I like to call Shrimpgearus. Once all that was done, I'd once again hide the joints with the clay foam and sculpt them to make the figure look more natural. Then it was just a matter of priming and painting the figure. I was gonna use my airbrush to spray on the gray paint once the primer settled, but I ran into a problem. Alright chat, I was working on Anguirus, right? And my airbrush is cooked, bruh. It's not supposed to come out of there. Yeah. I ended up losing a piece of my airbrush when trying to clean it, resulting in what you just saw, and that was my sign to give up. is what I would say if I was a loser like you! I proceeded to hand paint the base instead. Then, I added a black wash across the whole figure to bring out the details and painted everything that needed color, like the carapace and the claws, and even accounted for the areas that were originally left untouched, like the tail club, the inside of the mouth, and the arm spikes. I also added a dirt-like dry brush on the underside of the figure, since Anguirus is known to crawl around in the dirt all the time, and since there was some color on the belly of the actual suit. And now you're left with the beast we can all feast our eyes upon. I'm really proud of how this turned out. Yeah, it does have its flaws, like the somewhat exposed joints on the tail and paint on the carapace, but it just feels great to have a fully articulated version of the 2004 Anguirus. The bigger joints really allow the figure to be more sturdy, and he just looks awesome next to my custom painted final Goji, especially given the history that I've had with this specific figure. I'm really glad I could give it a new purpose. So, that was my attempt at making my own articulated Godzilla figures. Did I improve the figures, or did I just end up making them worse? And what was the best custom figure in this video? Let me know what you think in the comments, and how I can potentially improve in the future. If you enjoyed this, remember to check out some of the other content that I mentioned earlier, as it truly helps. Well, that concludes this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you all later, Kaiji Bros. Shrimp on! Wait, that's not